Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Widows. Widows is very much a heist film, but it's very much a heist film made in a kind of classy Hollywood way. The way we don't really make movies anymore. And kind of a cliche thing to say, but it also is sort of like the way we make TV now. It feels like a peak TV HBO event type of show, but like brought down to like the 2-hour plus length that it is. There's tons of different plot lines in this ever complicated kind of story. It's not just about a bunch of widows who go on to do this heist so they can pay off these mobsters to leave them alone, but it's also about the city of Chicago. It's about this local election that's going on. It's about, these construction contracts. It's about a hair salon. It's about these families. It's about all these various different characters, and it's so interesting and kind of thought-provoking, and so many different ideas going on throughout it. You can't help but be kind of brought into it. It feels more kind of arty than most of these things usually are. It's not, I'd say, as interested in inviting you in as it is kind of showing you the circumstances of which this all happened. And that does feel, I guess, in the modern sense, more like you'd see something from Better Call Saul than you'd see something from like Pretty Little Lies or Liars or whatever. You expect that from that, and it plays almost like that. And what Steve McQueen does with this, which this feels both very Steve McQueen in terms of how little score it uses in some places and how quiet and arty it is and how beautiful and how well he uses the cinematography, to being more like you'd expect from that kind of modern TV type of thing. Doing it more in like kind of very much a filmic way, but in the modern sense of sort of storytelling. I really like this film, and I think the sad thing is I think a lot of people in audiences sort of like weren't prepared for it. I think they just want like a big action film, and in terms of this crazy cast, you'd maybe expect that, but it wants so much more than just kind of hitting the genre beats and stuff. There's a majesty to that, certainly, but Steve McQueen is trying to say more with all these things. Like, he doesn't want to just have an action sequence because his last movie won Best Picture and stuff, so he might as well like cash in. Like, if this is him cashing in, this is pretty. This is not cashing in. This is like a guy who really wants to make a interesting film as much about Chicago as it is not showing Chicago and the glamorous Chicago. I've been to Chicago, and there's certain places I was like, oh, I know where that is, and there's other places like, oh, I don't think I'd ever go there. Viola Davis' husband was running this crew who would do these various jobs, basically heists and so forth, and they get killed, and she's told she has to pay this guy back, this gangster who's running a local election, who's going to use these $2 million to complete his campaign, and he has to give it back to him in a month so he can use that money to buy more ads and ad spots. So it feeds directly into that. You have a great performance by Daniel Kaluuya, who's kind of playing his gangster friend who's with him the whole time. He's sort of someone everyone knows because of Get Out and Black Panther, and now this. I don't think he's someone who people see movies for necessarily, but he was definitely, like, in the trailers, really captivating and very good at playing evil, like amazingly good at doing it. He's such a great actor, and in this film, like, he really brought like the criminal element, like the savagery to it. Like, you didn't really need like a ton of guys doing it, you just needed to show him. And oftentimes when they were doing stuff, it would be off screen because you just see his face, and that looked like way more maniacal than anybody punching anyone. Like, he just has that within him, which was just remarkable. And he's kind of with Brian Henry, who is from Atlanta, so it's like I guess it's the second film he's been in with someone from Atlanta. I found this film, like, there are honestly too many actors to talk about, and oftentimes there are so many that I forgot when I was watching. I was like, oh, Robert Duvall's in this? Cool. Like, there are just so many people, but they're all like in a true, like, we're doing this big kind of Hollywood, we have a great director kind of a thing. No one's really, I would say, really wasted so much. I mean, maybe some of the husbands who don't really get a lot of screen time. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen like most of a lot of their screen times. Liam Neeson has more, partly because he's Liam Neeson and his part is a lot more significant, but everyone else, like Michelle Rodriguez actually getting a good part in a good movie, which I really like, because I like Michelle Rodriguez. I know people give her a bad reputation, which is unwarranted because she's awesome in almost everything. Elizabeth Debicki, who I feel like this was more of like a big Oscar movie kind of role for her, and I think it's very well deserved. I know Jennifer Lawrence was at one point considered for a role in this. I'm assuming that was maybe hers, but I think I like that Elizabeth Debicki, what she did with it quite well. And I like how it used the wealth of Chicago and the poverty of Chicago, and how it did every shot. Like, there was a shot that I thought it was smart for what I thought it was doing, but then I heard what Mark Kermode thought, and I think he was right about it, where you see Colin Farrell's character who's running in this election against Brian Henry, and he gets in the car, and you just see the outside of the car, and you just see kind of the windshield. I thought it was basically say, like, this is who this guy is outside of being a politician, because you didn't really get to see that much. And the thing is, like, this is who he is behind closed doors. Like, this is the part he'd never let you see, and so that's why, you know, you're not seeing it. But he noticed that you can, if you look on the windshield, you can see like the poverty change and it become richer just through that drive, which I was like, oh man, that is smart. It was a good shot. And I think there's so many times where he'll obscure something in this, Steve McQueen, or with the cinematographer Sean Bobbitt, who also shot 12 Years a Slave and worked with Steve McQueen quite a bit. Did a lot of stuff with like mirrors and Viola Davis and interesting shots with that, which I think a lot of people would go like, oh, that looks cool, but like whatever, what's that saying? But he's able to like really make it kind of surreal and sort of interesting and really play on that and play on, you know, certain things that might be more obvious but work so much well in a thriller like this. All the moving parts to it kind of highlight how integral all of this is. And it does feel like David Simon, it does feel like Vince Gilligan, it feels like those guys, and that's what we're more, I guess, used to with this kind of a plot. But it played within that. You don't feel like it's just doing it for the sake of doing it. You get that it's saying like so much more than that. It's saying the trauma these women have been through. It's saying the trauma that the city has been through. It's saying how are we in the place we are right now. A lot of modern movies, you have points because you are supposed to have them and so forth, and Widows doesn't feel like that at all. Widows feels like it all naturally flows together, and that's good fucking screenwriting. And that screenplay written by Gillian Flynn, who also wrote Gone Girl the book and Gone Girl the movie also, and Steve McQueen, really well written script. This movie's long, it feels long, but in like that good, like I want to watch all of it. And I have heard people say like, can I watch like 8 more hours of this? And like, yeah, if this was a show, I mean, it was a show actually. Interestingly enough, a British show, which interestingly I would really like to hear a comparison, and maybe I would watch that show now. I think there's maybe there's like one person maybe who's in both, but I don't think it is. It's such an unwasted screenplay, but you still want more of it, you know. I do think in some places, like there's some part with the sun where they really explore that I sort of wondered, like, and not to be callous or cold, I wondered if we needed that necessarily. I don't know if we did. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I don't know, I think I did need that. Viola Davis is always great, and it's kind of almost obvious because she's playing her parts in a way that I think you get to certain actors where they know how to play that kind of a role. And she was good at it, but it almost felt like she understood why, like you understood why she had that guarded front and that kind of sternness to her. And it almost felt more warranted, and almost so much more sadness in her performance than I've ever seen her do before. She like nails down the tone of this movie in such a degree that you're just like going forward with her. I also like Catherine Ervo, who is mainly a Broadway actress, but did a really great job. She's kind of like the least connected to all of this. I really, really liked her. Everyone had such charisma, from like Carrie Coon to Liam Neeson to Robert Duvall, who I mentioned already, Jackie Weaver, who no one's going to really remember from this, but still did a good job. Colin Farrell, who's definitely like making his way back, like understanding he's very good in a supporting role, not so much in a lead role. This is the kind of role that I'd kind of like, if I'd heard about it, go, I don't know, you know, he's like, I like him when he's strange in a supporting indie movie. But he did very well here, and him and Duvall have great chemistry as father and son. I think Widows has a savagery to its thriller, like, you know, like, if this doesn't work out, it is going to be highly traumatic for these people. It is going to be hard. And that feeling of life, like, I need to fix things or this is going to get worse. Like, this is not going to get better. And Widows has that all throughout, and it has sort of a calm immediacy to it, which is sort of a weird thing to say, but I think what it's saying is like this deadline is approaching, and no matter what you do, it is going to happen. So you need to find a way to stop it. And their way to stop it is this heist. And I think going forward with it and their planning of it, I do think there's so much of it that's like setting up things and explaining things, but it does it in such a way you're like kind of want to be there with it. Like, there's certain things with exposition and exposition heavy films that can get rather boring, but it didn't feel like exposition. It felt like the exposition was so much a part of the plot, you wanted to be with it. I think Widows is the rare heist film that I almost feel like the characters and the plot lines and all the bullshit that made the heist happen, which you usually don't care about, is probably almost as interesting as the actual heist, which says a lot. I mean, it really does, because there's so many heists where you're like, oh, that's, you know, that's sort of interesting, you're gonna rob that thing, whatever. And I think truly great heist movies, like if you've ever seen Black Sunday, like I love like the idea of like robbing the Super Bowl and them going through it, and like that whole idea is like highly fascinating. And I almost like remember the idea of the heist more than the heist itself. And Widows is that same way, where it's like, well, they need to steal that money. Where's that money from? Why do they need that money? That money needs to go to this guy, but that money's actually from this, which is evil, which leads to this guy. And if this happens, then this guy might win this election, and then that would happen, and then this, and then, you know, they would get screwed anyway, but maybe they would make it out. And you're just like it is so interesting within that plot line that I just loved it. Like, there's very few movies right now that can really do that as well as Steve McQueen did with this, with Gillian Flynn. I absolutely love Widows. I think it was probably one of the best thrillers I've seen in a long time, and it's one of the most interesting, and it's one that I'm happy that a Hollywood studio would actually make. It feels like kind of one of those accident things, like The Counselor or something, but this is actually, you know, really good. I don't think, you know, it has a killer cast with a great director, a beautifully shot, wonderful adult thriller. If you're missing out on this, I don't think you can really say, like, why don't they make movies like that anymore or anything like that, because they just did, and you really shouldn't be sitting around missing it. You should be experiencing Widows, because Widows is that kind of interesting, weaving kind of peak TV, but also, you know, peak Hollywood studio kind of a movie that is really the kind of smart, intelligent kind of thriller that we all say we want, and here it is. So maybe we should just shut up and actually prove it, much like this movie does. So if you have seen Widows and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.